Hi, my name is Amanda Sears, and I'm the horticulture agent here in Madison County, Kentucky. And this is the first in the Impatient Gardener series. Today we'll be talking about how to get started, and really this is geared towards people who maybe are getting started for the first time in gardening, or maybe you just need a tune-up. And so this is meant to be kind of a very short little introduction. And if you have more questions, please feel free to contact me, email me, call me, and my information will be at the end of the presentation. So first, the basics. You need full sun to have a good garden, and that really means about 6 to 8 hours a day. In my own garden at home, I've been gardening in the same spot for probably 8 years, and I've noticed now that the trees are starting to grow up around it enough that I'm starting to get shade. And so I'm going to actually have to move my own garden. And so some things like that, kind of things to keep in mind. There are some plants that grow okay with less than 6 hours. I think spinach and pumpkins are too. Also, you want the ground to be relatively level. You don't, partly because as we have rain events, then if we have it on a relatively steep ground, what will happen is that we'll have runoff and erosion. And if you're seeded recently, you'll end up having seeds run down the hill. Drainage is very important. Here in Madison County, we have a lot of clay soils, and that means that those soils hold water more, and that can lead to issues because plants don't like to have their roots wet for a very long time. And so it sets up an event where plants may end up getting sick easy. If that's the case, what you may want to do is think about building a raised bed. You want to have it close to a water source. Plants need about an inch of rain per week. And on average, normally we may get an inch of rain a week, especially in the spring, but there are times in the summer, especially at the end of summer, where there'll be maybe a month where we won't get very much rain. And so you need to have a plan in place. And then soil testing. Our office does provide free soil testing to Madison County residents, up to 10 samples for free per home or farm. And those samples or tests provide information on nutrient availability and things like pH. And so it takes about 2 weeks to get results back, and we need 2 cups of soil per test. Some important things to consider. I'm a big advocate of starting small. I talked to a lot of people over the year about their gardens, and sometimes people, I think, go in with the thought of, if a little's good, I'm going to do a whole lot more and it'll be better. And what happens is it becomes a little overwhelming. It's easy to think of gardening and it being fun and exciting in March when you're thinking of buying seeds and then you plant them, but you have to take care of them in July and August when it's hot, and you have to go out and hoe and you have to pour water. So start small and manageable. Choose plants that fit your needs, things that you're going to eat, because if you're growing a lot of stuff that you're not going to eat or take care of or think's pretty, if it's flowers, if you're not, those don't fit you, then it's just going to be extra work. And some plants are easier to grow than others. I actually have a list coming up in a moment of my thoughts on that. So if you're new to gardening, maybe start up some of the easier plants. Do I need to start my own seeds? We'll talk about that later, as well as how to care for seeds and when to plant. So planning is very important. Myself, I'm not always the best at this, but from year to year, it's always good to have a plan and to keep that plan for next year so that you know what happened last year. So I try to get out grid paper every year and kind of make a diagram as to where my seeds and where my plants will go with plant spacings, because otherwise you end up putting things randomly, and a lot of times things are planted too closely together. Plants that are planted too closely together end up competing with each other just as bad as if there were a lot of weeds in the garden. And so this is actually a diagram I did for a raised bed that I put spinach, kale, and lettuce in. So here's a list of plants I think are probably the most popular one, or the one I hear people talk about the most. So I've got them ranked easiest to most difficult, and you might think, well, why is corn difficult to grow? To me, corn itself isn't hard to grow, plant, come up. What's hard about corn is I can't grow corn without things like raccoons eating it. And so when you're deciding what to plant, it's not just about the ease of planting it and putting those seeds out. It's, are there a lot of insect problems? Is there going to be disease? Is the neighborhood cat going to come lay on it? These are things just that you have to kind of think about in terms of maybe preventing some aggravation later on. Lettuce is probably, to me, the easiest thing to grow. It seeds easily, it comes up quickly, and you can do multiple harvests. The same with leafy greens. And so beans, summer squash, and cucumber are also very easy, and they can be direct seeded into the garden very easily. I would also like to mention a lot of times you can get those three in varieties that either bush or have a vining growth pattern. And so tomato and pepper, mostly just disease problems on those two. And two, I think people oftentimes grow as many tomatoes as possible. And so because they've got too many, it's hard to take care of. So when do you plant your plants? Well, plants can be broken into two different groups, cool season and warm season. Cool season plants grow better in the cooler temperatures when the air and soil temperatures are between 60 and 65. And they can tolerate light frost. So these are ideal for spring and fall, and there are things like kale and lettuce, spinach. Otherwise, the other is warm season crops. And these are what I would consider usually the mainstay garden crops, like tomatoes, corn, peppers, things that we usually think of. So within that, you've got cool season, and then you can plant warm season, and then you can plant cool season again. And so it ends up being a 3 garden year. You can see at the table on the right, I've kind of taken out some plants that I thought might be easy to grow. It's very similar to the list that I just showed, and talked about the earliest planting that you can put those out. And you can see something like spinach is very early. It's made March 1st. So, but for all of those, there's an earliest planting date and there's a latest planting date. So you kind of have to keep both of those in mind. I mentioned warm season plants like their temperatures to be warmer, and you also have to plant those after the threat of frost has passed, and that's about May 10th here in Kentucky, or in central Kentucky. Now, last year, we, I think, had a freeze after that, and it hit everybody really hard. Most years you can plant before that, so it's really a gamble, and it's up to you, if you're a gambler, on when you might want to plant that. But May 10th, I would not put anything in until probably around Derby Day or Mother's Day. So why do we want to start seeds? Why do you need to start seeds inside? Garden plants can be broken down into another 2 groups. There are some plants that have a very short time between seed planting and to harvest. These include things like lettuce and beans. And so if we plant them outside in about 50 days, if lettuce would, and for instance, we would have a plant that would be harvestable. But other plants have a much longer time from seed planting to harvest. Things like tomatoes, and that would be up to 80 days. And so by planting those tomato plants inside in a protected area, like a greenhouse or under some grow lights, we're actually starting the plant earlier so that when we take it outside, maybe it only has 50 days left until it's harvestable. And so we're just getting a head start. But things like beans, squash, cucumbers, those things can be direct seeded outside, and we'll have plenty of time to have a harvestable crop. Also, you can start them inside too. It's up to you. I am going to go into some detail in just a second on some pros and cons of why you might want to start your own plants versus just buying transplants. And so transplants are plants started from seed in a protected location and moved to another location for planting. I have to admit, I do not start my own plants. I have tried and it just does not work for me. I don't have a good light source in my house. I have a cat that I think would get into it. And so before the season, or at the beginning of the season, I buy plants from greenhouses around the county. We are lucky here that we have a lot of producers that grow transplants. And so, my tomatoes, I even buy, I have to admit, things like kale and lettuce just to get a head start because it does it's exciting and it kind of is a quick garden. I also plant seeds for those things that I do know will have that are easier to grow as from a seed. And so why do people want to grow their own from the seed anyway? Well, there are a lot of varieties that are hard to find at greenhouses. And so this gives you a lot more flexibility if there's something that you especially want to grow. And also it gives people a lot of satisfaction knowing that it's something they can do and they can watch and enjoy. The cons I mentioned, it is extra work and you have to start early. And the light source is an extremely important thing. Like I said, I don't have a good light source at home, and so that was the biggest reason that I don't do it. So if you want to start your own transplants, this is a good guide as to when you would start your seeds inside, and you want to just count back from the last frost-free day, which is May 10th. And that'll just let you have that for your own information. So if you do start your own seeds, don't use garden soil because it will be too compacted and that will not lead to great root growth. Containers should have a hole on the bottom for drainage and follow the directions on the seed packet. I would point out on that picture on the right bottom, those are peat pellets. And if you put those little pellets in water, they'll expand and you're actually able to plant seeds directly into them. Seed packets have a lot of information on them. And it's good once you plant the seeds from them to actually keep them for a reference later. But some of the most important information is row spacing and how far apart to put your plants. Because I think I mentioned earlier, plants that are planted too closely together just compete with one another. And so you have to end up either going in and thinning, or you could have some disease problems. Also, extremely important is seed depth. Seeds have a certain depth at which they can be planted. If it's deeper, the little seed doesn't have enough energy to make it to the surface. And if it's too shallow, it won't grow well either. But also the days to germination. It seems like every time I plant seeds, I think, why has this not come up yet? Or do I need to replant? And then I look on the package and I realize, okay, I've got a few more days until I have to start worrying about it. So the days of germination is something I always look at as well. Now to sprout seeds, you actually don't need a lot setup at all. You just need to maintain warmth and moisture. And so if you wanted to maybe get some of those peat pellets or some cups with your media or your soil in there, and then put them into maybe a Tupperware container, plant your seeds, put that into a Ziploc bag or cover with plastic wrap to create a humid environment. Put that on top of your freezer or refrigerator, somewhere warm. And then when plants emerge, then take it out of that plastic and put it under the light. So with care of seedlings, the south-facing window is very important, but you can also use lights. So fluorescent lights, for instance, you would need about 4 40-watt bulbs, and they would need to be kept at about 6 to 12 inches above the plants and for most of the day. In fact, about 18 hours a day. And I think that's surprising to people, but you can't completely substitute the power of the sun by having lights like this. And so it will have to have, because the light is weaker, it will have to be on longer. There are special grow lights that are available, or you could use a cool white or warm white fluorescent lamp. But there are also bulbs that are considered full spectrum grow light bulbs, and really that would probably be the best thing that you could use. Now, I think the picture on the right is actually some seeds I started in my office, and you can see how long and spindly they are, and that is a sign that they're actually are not receiving enough sunlight. And so if your seedlings do look like that, then you need to get them into either more direct sunlight or increase the amount of light you're giving them. Now the media, which is another word for potting soil, if you used media that didn't have fertilizer in it, then you may have to mix some fertilizer, maybe at half strength, to put in about a week after those leaves start to emerge. Now with soil preparation, the picture on the right actually is not my feet, but I have actually gotten my boots sucked off in mud before, so that could actually be a picture of me. You want to prepare to a depth of at least 8 inches, at least 6 inches. And you know, when we're gardening, and I should have said this earlier, it's as hard or as it's as easy or as hard as you want it to be. And so you don't have to come in with a rototiller or huge equipment. You could instead you could kill and remove the grass and then just take shovels and dig as deep down and get the soil worked up that way. One way to kill out the grass area would be to maybe put cardboard or old carpet on top of the grass, and that'll kill it out, and then you can take it off. Do not work soil when it's wet. And you know, if it's wet, you can take a ball of soil and kind of make a mud ball in your hand, drop it on your boot. If it doesn't crack, it stays together, then the soil's too wet to work. If you walk in wet soil, what happens is that you end up causing compaction issues, which can affect plant growth. And once compaction occurs, there's no cure for that. So I'm a big advocate of adding organic matter, and that can be in the form of compost or cover crops, and I'll cover that in a later class. And also, when you're creating a seed bed, which means when you're getting the soil ready to plant, either put plants in or seeds, you want it to be to be worked up pretty fine. And so, especially if you're not using a rototiller, go in maybe with a rake and break up clods and then kind of smooth it out. So I hope that has been helpful. I wanted to go ahead and talk about upcoming classes. Gardening in small spaces will be next week, followed by backyard fruit, herbs, perennial basics, and then what to plant now and how to grow it. So if you have any friends that are interested in gardening, please let them know about these classes. I will be posting this video on my website hopefully later today, and along with a copy of the presentation too. So if you wanted to access it there. So my name is Amanda Sears, and you can contact me at amanda.sears@uky.edu, or you can call me at 623-4072. Thanks. I look forward to talking to you.